Sometimes your mind doesn't need a storm outside to feel restless. It creates one inside. You're lying in bed, the world is quiet, but your thoughts? Loud. You replay that conversation from 3 days ago, analyze a simple text message for hidden meaning, or worry endlessly about something that might happen next week. If you've ever felt trapped inside your own head, if you've ever felt like your brain refuses to rest, this message is for you. Because today, we're not just acknowledging the problem, we're going to understand it. And once you understand something, you gain the power to change it. So don't just listen, reflect, pause, and let these words reach the part of you that desperately craves peace. Let's begin. Ladies and gentlemen, overthinking. The word sounds harmless, but in reality, it quietly robs millions of people of their mental clarity, emotional peace, and even sleep. Before we talk about solutions, we must first understand what overthinking truly is. Psychology defines overthinking as a process of dwelling excessively on one's thoughts, especially in a repetitive, unproductive way. It is not deep thinking. Deep thinking is conscious, insightful, and focused. Overthinking, on the other hand, is chaotic. It's like your brain opens too many tabs and forgets which one it's actually using. You see, overthinking often starts small. A single thought, a memory, what if? But before you know it, it snowballs. You begin to dissect your own words, second-guess your actions, and question other people's intentions, even when nothing went wrong. And the worst part, you can't turn it off. It feels like you're trapped in your own mind, constantly analyzing, worrying, predicting, assuming, and imagining. In psychological terms, overthinking falls under the broader umbrella of cognitive rumination. There are two types of rumination: reflective and brooding. Reflective rumination can actually be healthy. It's when you think deeply about a problem to find a solution. But brooding rumination is dangerous. That's the kind where you sit in the dark corners of your mind, circling around problems, regrets, and doubts with no way out. Many people believe overthinking is a sign of intelligence or self-awareness. And while introspection is healthy, overthinking is not. It's not insight. It's not growth. It's mental exhaustion disguised as analysis. It's your brain convincing you that you're being productive, when in fact you're stuck. What causes overthinking? The roots are deeper than we think. Often, it stems from fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of uncertainty. Some people develop this pattern due to past trauma. If your past involved unpredictability, criticism, or emotional neglect, your brain learns to prepare for the worst. It tries to predict every outcome, control every detail, and avoid every mistake. This hypervigilance may have once protected you, but today it keeps you from living freely. Have you ever noticed how overthinking doesn't just stay in your head? It affects your body too. Your heart beats faster. Your chest tightens. You can't focus. You can't sleep. You can't breathe deeply. That's because chronic overthinking triggers the body's stress response. Your nervous system interprets your racing thoughts as real threats and starts preparing for survival. But when your thoughts never stop, neither does your body's alarm system. And slowly, silently, your peace begins to dissolve. Now here's the irony. Overthinking gives you the illusion of control. You feel like by thinking more, you're somehow preparing for life better. But in reality, you're just delaying action. You're avoiding risk. You're stuck in analysis paralysis. The more you think, the less you do. And the less you do, the more anxious you become. It's a vicious cycle, one that so many of us live inside without even realizing it. Let me ask you something personal. When was the last time you made a decision without doubting yourself 5 times after? When was the last time you allowed a moment to be joyful without wondering how long it would last or what could go wrong next? This is the cost of overthinking. It steals the present. It kills spontaneity. It poisons joy. It makes us prisoners of imaginary futures and dead pasts. But here's the truth. Overthinking is not your identity. It's a habit. And like all habits, it can be understood, interrupted, and eventually changed. But before you can change it, you need to see it for what it is, a mental pattern that no longer serves you. Psychology doesn't shame overthinkers. It explains them. It shows us that your mind isn't broken, it's wounded. It's trying to protect you the only way it knows how. But you don't need protection from life. You need presence in it. So today, I want you to take a breath and remind yourself, not every thought deserves your attention. Not every doubt deserves your energy. And not every problem needs to be solved in your head. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is let go, because peace doesn't come from thinking more. It comes from thinking less and living more. The human brain is a powerful machine, capable of solving problems, analyzing patterns, and making sense of the world around us. But when this power goes unchecked, it can turn against us. Overthinking is one of the clearest examples of this internal malfunction, a process where the brain begins to create threats where there are none, generate confusion in place of clarity, and replay possibilities instead of helping us move forward. Psychologically, overthinking isn't just a bad habit. It's often a learned behavior shaped by experience, emotion, and the brain's innate desire to protect us. The brain is wired for survival, not peace. This is a crucial point. Evolution has designed the human brain to be alert, reactive, and cautious. Thousands of years ago, this helped our ancestors stay alive in dangerous environments. Being hyper-aware of surroundings, thinking ahead, imagining worst-case scenarios. These were survival tools. But in today's world, where physical threats are rare, that same system misfires. The brain begins to treat emotional discomfort or uncertainty as if it's life-threatening. One of the key psychological drivers behind overthinking is fear. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of making the wrong decision. These fears cause the brain to go into analysis mode. It thinks, if I just consider every possibility, I'll avoid pain. But this is a trap. The brain cannot predict everything, and the world cannot be controlled by thought alone. Still, the mind tries, and in doing so, it creates a loop, a cycle of constant what-ifs, doubts, and imagined scenarios. Another major factor that contributes to overthinking is the illusion of control. The human mind tends to associate thinking with control. When we feel uncertain or anxious, we start thinking more because we believe that thinking will help us regain power over a situation. However, instead of bringing clarity, this kind of thinking often leads to mental paralysis. It becomes a case of too much information and too many imagined outcomes, making it impossible to make confident decisions. The overthinking mind is like a computer running too many programs at once, slow, overheated, and unable to function properly. Emotional wounds also play a significant role in why the brain overthinks. People who have experienced emotional trauma, instability, or excessive criticism in their past often become hypervigilant. Their brains adapt by scanning for potential threats, not just physical, but emotional ones too. They might obsess over how others perceive them, replay conversations to look for signs of judgment, or analyze situations endlessly to avoid embarrassment or conflict. In this case, overthinking becomes a form of self-defense. It's the brain saying, let me overprepare so I don't get hurt again. But in trying to protect itself, it ends up exhausting itself. Perfectionism is another deeply rooted cause. Many overthinkers hold themselves to impossibly high standards. They don't just want to do well, they want to avoid any possibility of failure or flaw. This makes every decision, every action, feel like a test. The mind becomes consumed with details, comparisons, and outcomes. Instead of moving forward, it gets stuck in pursuit of a perfect answer, one that doesn't exist. Cultural and social pressures can intensify this mental pattern. In fast-paced, performance-driven environments, people are taught that thinking harder, working longer, and worrying more means they care more. But psychology teaches the opposite. Chronic overthinking reduces cognitive clarity, drains emotional energy, and lowers decision-making quality. It's not a sign of caring. It's a sign that the mind is overwhelmed. There's also a neurological explanation behind overthinking. The brain's default mode network, the part active when the mind is at rest, tends to wander into thoughts about the past or future. For individuals who are prone to anxiety or self-doubt, this default state can easily turn into a spiral of overthinking. Instead of resting, the brain begins to rehearse old mistakes or predict potential disasters. Without conscious effort to redirect these thoughts, the cycle continues. It's important to understand that overthinking is not simply a character flaw or a lack of discipline. It's a pattern formed by the interaction of emotion, memory, fear, and learned behavior. In fact, many overthinkers are highly intelligent and sensitive individuals. Their minds are capable of incredible depth, but when that depth is turned inward with no boundaries, it can become destructive. The brain, in these moments, is trying to help, but psychology shows us that good intentions in the brain don't always lead to good outcomes. Overthinking is a result of the system trying to do too much, trying to be too safe, too certain, too perfect. The mind doesn't know when to stop unless we teach it. That's why awareness is the first step. When you understand why your brain overthinks, when you recognize that it's trying to protect you, not punish you, you create the space for change. You begin to respond to your thoughts instead of being controlled by them. Overthinking is not the enemy. It's a symptom. And when you learn to decode the reasons behind it, you also begin to discover the way out of it. The key is not to silence the mind forcefully, but to retrain it gently, to show it that peace is not the absence of thought, but the ability to direct thought where it truly matters. Overthinking doesn't always scream loudly. Often, it shows up quietly, in the way you feel tired even after a full night's sleep, in the way your chest tightens when nothing specific is wrong, or in the way you cancel plans simply because your mind is too loud to enjoy anything. Though many people dismiss overthinking as a minor annoyance, psychology reveals that its impact on mental health is deep, silent, and often underestimated. The first area where overthinking strikes is anxiety. When you constantly think about what might go wrong, your mind starts to behave as if those imagined outcomes are actually happening. This leads to the activation of the body's fight or flight response, a biological stress reaction meant to protect you from danger. But in the case of overthinking, the danger is imagined, not real. Still, your body doesn't know the difference. Your heart beats faster, your breathing changes, your muscles tighten. The mind keeps spinning, and soon you're stuck in a loop, fearing things that haven't even happened yet. Over time, this constant state of mental alertness leads to chronic anxiety. You become more sensitive to uncertainty, more reactive to small triggers, and more doubtful of your own ability to handle life. What starts as a single repetitive thought can spiral into full-blown generalized anxiety, where even the smallest decisions become overwhelming. Sleep is another casualty. When your thoughts refuse to settle, your body finds it nearly impossible to relax. You may lie in bed tired but unable to turn off your mind. You replay conversations. You think about what you could have said or done differently. You worry about tomorrow. You plan for the worst-case scenario, even if nothing has gone wrong. Psychologically, this is called cognitive arousal, when the brain is too active to allow the body to rest. Insomnia becomes a regular visitor, and with it comes fatigue, irritability, and weakened focus during the day. Overthinking also disrupts emotional regulation. The more you think about a situation, the more emotionally charged it becomes. For example, if someone says something that hurt your feelings, a balanced mind might process it, understand it, and move on. But an overthinking mind will replay it endlessly, amplifying the pain, imagining hidden meanings, and building stories around it that may not even be true. This emotional magnification creates unnecessary distress and often leads to overreactions or emotional withdrawal. People around you might not understand why something so small affects you so deeply, but the truth is, it's not the event that hurt you, it's the replay of it on a deeper level. Overthinking often contributes to low self-esteem. When you're constantly analyzing your actions, doubting your choices, and questioning your worth, you begin to internalize a narrative that you are never enough. The mind begins to associate mistakes with personal failure and uncertainty with incompetence. You may start to avoid challenges, fearing that you'll mess up or be judged. This avoidance cycle reinforces feelings of inadequacy and keeps you stuck in a limited version of yourself. Psychologically, this becomes a form of self-sabotage. The fear of failure becomes so loud that you stop trying at all. Another common effect is decision fatigue. The more you overthink your options, the harder it becomes to make even simple choices. Should you speak up in a meeting? Should you reply to that message? Should you accept that invitation? Each decision, no matter how small, becomes a mental battlefield. The overthinking brain needs constant reassurance, constant certainty, both of which are impossible to guarantee in real life. As a result, Indecisiveness grows. You delay action. You ask others to decide for you. You miss opportunities, not because you didn't care, but because you couldn't escape your own mind. Over time, all these symptoms can pave the way for depression. Not in every case, but often enough that mental health professionals take it seriously. When overthinking dominates your thoughts, it's easy to feel helpless, as if you're drowning in your own mind. You begin to lose interest in things you once enjoyed. You isolate yourself because social situations feel too mentally exhausting. You become consumed by negative thought loops, and slowly, hope becomes harder to hold on to. In severe cases, overthinking paired with emotional exhaustion can lead to hopelessness, self-criticism, and even suicidal ideation. Socially, overthinking can create distance between you and others. You may misinterpret someone's words or silence. You might assume people are upset with you when they're not. You might avoid confrontation, yet feel resentful. This damages relationships, even when intentions are good. Friends and partners might not understand why you're so sensitive or distant. And without realizing it, your mind begins to build walls instead of bridges. It's important to understand that these impacts are not signs of weakness. They're signals. They show us that the brain, when left to run wild, can become both your greatest enemy and your loudest critic. The impact of overthinking on mental health is real, measurable, and deeply personal. But the good news is, what's understood can be unlearned. When you realize that your mind is not your enemy, but a wounded part of you trying to stay safe, you begin to treat yourself with more kindness. That's where healing starts. Not by forcing your mind to be quiet, but by showing it that it's safe to let go. Breaking the cycle of overthinking is not about shutting your mind off. It's about changing the way you relate to your thoughts. The first and most crucial step is awareness. Most people don't even realize they're overthinking because it feels so natural, so automatic. It becomes a default setting of the mind. So the key is to begin noticing it without judgment. Noticing when a single thought starts turning into a spiral. Noticing when a worry about tomorrow becomes a full-blown disaster scenario in your head. This shift from reacting to observing is powerful. It turns you from being lost in your thoughts to being the one witnessing them. Once you become aware of overthinking in action, the next step is grounding yourself in the present moment. Overthinking thrives in the realm of the hypothetical, the past that can't be changed or the future that hasn't arrived. But the present moment is where your power lies. Practicing mindfulness helps redirect your attention. This can be as simple as focusing on your breath, noticing the sensation of your feet on the floor, or listening closely to the sounds around you. It's not about escaping your thoughts, but anchoring yourself to reality. Even 30 seconds of deep, conscious breathing can interrupt the overthinking loop and remind your nervous system that you're safe. Another powerful tool is setting mental boundaries. Overthinking often comes from not knowing when to stop analyzing, stop predicting, stop replaying. One way to manage this is by scheduling worry time. It sounds strange, but giving yourself a limited, dedicated space to think through concerns, say 15 minutes in the evening, helps your brain learn that it doesn't have to solve everything all day long. Outside of that time, when worries pop up, you can gently tell your mind, not now, you'll get time later. Over time, this practice creates structure and teaches your brain to be more disciplined with its focus. Journaling is another method backed by psychological research. Writing your thoughts down, especially the ones that keep circling in your mind, helps externalize them. Once they're on paper, they often lose their intensity. You might see that what felt like a huge problem in your head becomes more manageable when written out. You also create distance between yourself and your thoughts. They stop feeling like absolute truths and start to appear more like temporary mental events, which is exactly what they are. Challenging cognitive distortions is essential. Overthinking is fueled by false beliefs, assumptions, exaggerations, black and white thinking. For instance, you may catch yourself thinking, if I make the wrong choice, everything will fall apart. That's catastrophizing. Or they didn't text me back, they must be angry. That's mind reading. The brain creates these distortions as shortcuts, but they often lead to emotional turmoil. One way to disrupt this is to ask yourself, is this thought a fact or just a fear? Learning to question your own thoughts breaks their emotional grip and introduces space for rational thinking. Learning how to take action is another major shift. Overthinking thrives in inaction. The longer you think about something without acting, the more overwhelming it becomes. That's why building the habit of taking small steps, even imperfect ones, is essential. Whether it's replying to a message you've been overanalyzing, submitting an idea you've been doubting, or making a decision after reasonable reflection, action creates clarity. It tells your brain that not everything needs to be rehearsed to death. You learn by doing, not just by thinking. It's also important to reduce the external noise that fuels overthinking. Constant exposure to social media, overstimulation from the news, and digital distractions overload the brain with information. That information then becomes raw material for overanalysis. Creating quiet moments in your day, device-free time, nature walks, simple breathing breaks, gives your mind the space to slow down. Silence isn't emptiness. It's medicine for the overthinking brain. Compassion plays a critical role too. A lot of overthinking is driven by self-judgment. The inner voice that says, "You're not good enough," or "You always mess things up." This voice creates fear, and fear feeds a cycle. The antidote is self-compassion. Speaking to yourself the way you would to someone you love. Reminding yourself that it's okay to make mistakes, that you don't need to have all the answers, that uncertainty is part of being human. This softens the inner critic and allows space for emotional healing. Finally, connection helps heal overthinking. The mind tends to spiral most when it's isolated. When you stay alone with your thoughts, they echo louder. Talking to someone you trust, a friend, therapist, mentor, often helps you gain perspective. Sometimes just saying a thought out loud is enough to reveal how irrational or exaggerated it actually is. Other times, just knowing someone understands lightens the emotional load. Human connection reminds you that you are not your thoughts, and you are never alone with them. Breaking the cycle of overthinking is not about eliminating thought altogether. It's about learning when to think and when to stop, when to reflect and when to release, when to prepare and when to trust. With time, intention, and consistency, you can teach your brain to return to stillness, not by force, but by choice. Inner peace isn't just a spiritual idea or an abstract feeling. It is, in fact, a measurable and trainable state of the brain. Neuroscience tells us that the mind is constantly changing in response to how we use it. This is called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire its own circuits based on repeated patterns of thinking and behavior. So, if someone spends years caught in a habit of overthinking, the brain wires itself to support that habit. But the opposite is also true. With conscious effort, the brain can be rewired for peace, presence, and clarity. The journey begins with understanding how the overthinking brain works. When the mind is overactive, the default mode network DMN, the part of the brain active during rest and mind wandering, becomes dominant. This network is closely linked to rumination, self-referential thinking, and excessive worry. When left unchecked, it can trap us in cycles of regret about the past or fear about the future. But researchers have found that practices like mindfulness meditation actually quiet this network. Over time, consistent mindfulness helps the brain shift its default state from chaos to calm. Functional MRI scans have shown that people who meditate regularly have less activity in the DMN and more activation in regions associated with emotional regulation and executive function, like the prefrontal cortex. This means they are better able to notice their thoughts without getting stuck in them. It also means they respond to stress more skillfully instead of being overwhelmed by it. Essentially, they have trained their minds to pause, reflect, and let go, the opposite of what overthinking teaches. Another key to rewiring the brain is changing our relationship with uncertainty. Overthinking thrives on the illusion that everything must be figured out in advance, that peace can only come when there are no unknowns. But neuroscience shows that tolerance of uncertainty is a skill that can be developed. The amygdala, the brain's fear center, becomes highly active when we face ambiguity. But when we expose ourselves gradually to uncertain situations without trying to control them, the amygdala's reactivity decreases over time. This means we become less emotionally hijacked by the unknown. The more we practice surrender, the more our brain learns to stay grounded in the middle of uncertainty. Gratitude is another powerful neurological tool. It might seem unrelated to overthinking at first, but studies show that gratitude activates the brain's reward system, including the ventral tegmental area and nucleus accumbens. These regions release dopamine, the feel-good chemical that boosts mood and motivation when we shift our focus toward what is going well. Even in small ways, the brain begins to release chemicals that reduce anxiety and bring balance to our emotional state. This breaks the cycle of hyperfocus on problems and trains the brain to see a broader, more realistic picture. One of the most overlooked practices in rewiring the overthinking brain is movement. Physical activity, particularly aerobic exercise, increases blood flow to the brain and promotes the release of endorphins, serotonin, and brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. These chemicals support learning, memory, and emotional resilience. Exercise also helps reset the stress response, which often fuels overthinking. A brisk walk, dancing, swimming, even light stretching sends signals to the nervous system that it's safe to relax. Movement grounds the mind and the body, reminding us that we are not just thoughts, but living beings. Sleep is another critical component. Chronic overthinking often goes hand in hand with sleep deprivation. And yet, quality sleep is when the brain does its deepest healing and reorganizing. During deep sleep, the brain clears out toxic waste, strengthens neural connections, and consolidates learning. Lack of sleep leads to heightened activity in the amygdala and decreased regulation from prefrontal cortex, meaning we feel more anxious and less able to manage it. Prioritizing consistent, restorative sleep literally gives the brain a chance to reset. Compassion-based practices also play a key role in rewiring the brain. Whether it's through self-compassion exercises, loving-kindness meditation, or gentle inner dialogue, these practices activate the insula and anterior cingulate cortex, regions involved in empathy, connection, and emotional balance. Overthinkers tend to have harsh inner critics. By shifting toward kindness, not as a concept but as a mental habit, we soften that inner voice and replace fear with understanding. This calms the nervous system and creates a brain environment where peace is not only possible but sustainable. The science is clear. The brain is not fixed. It listens to how we use it, what we focus on, how we breathe, move, sleep, think, and feel. Inner peace isn't about removing all thoughts or avoiding stress. It's about training the brain to respond rather than react, to observe rather than obsess, to let go rather than hold tight. With repetition, intention, and care, even the most overactive mind can learn the language of calm. Peace, then, is not a destination. It's a practice, a daily decision. And through the lens of psychology and neuroscience, we now know it's also a skill that can be learned, strengthened, and reclaimed one thought at a time. So, after diving deep into the psychological layers of overthinking, what have we really uncovered? We've seen that overthinking isn't simply thinking too much. It's a cognitive trap, a silent disruptor that hijacks your clarity, your decisions, your emotions, and ultimately, your peace. It begins with harmless reflection, but can quickly turn into mental noise so loud that you can't hear your own calm. Psychology helps us understand that overthinking has roots in how the brain is wired, but it also gives us tools. Tools to pause, tools to change, tools to heal. Whether it's becoming aware of your thought patterns, learning to regulate your nervous system, challenging your inner dialogue, or rewiring the brain through mindfulness, movement, and compassion, you have more power than you think. The impact on mental health is real: anxiety, sleep loss, emotional burnout, and even depression. But it is not your identity. Overthinking is a habit, not a life sentence. And like all habits, it can be broken. When you begin to shift from reacting to observing, when you stop needing to control everything and start trusting the present, when you realize that peace isn't found in solving every problem, but in letting go of the ones you created in your head, that's when transformation begins. The science is clear. You are not stuck with the mind you have. You can rewire it, not by force, but through awareness, intention, and small daily acts of self-kindness. So the next time your mind starts to spiral, pause, breathe, remind yourself that you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness behind them. And in that space is your freedom.